Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's all those things, all the above. Welcome to A Real Point of View here at Movie Central. Welcome, everybody, to A Real Point of View. My name is Greg Morgan, and I am the host of our show, and I'm also the real movie guy. And joining me are two other internet film critics. We have the movie maven herself, Miss Karen D., and we have the guy who doesn't pick a bad movie, Mr.
Allegedly.
Stephen C. Yes. Hey, I didn't say
Yeah,
it, Steve. That was
you did.
Karen.
You didn't let me get allegedly in there. You're supposed to pause, and then I'm supposed to say allegedly.
You just can't. You actually were just fast because I was gonna pause, but you
Yeah,
just
your
went right
reaction
in there.
was well overdone. I'm going to need you to take a seat in the back of the class.
All right.
Well, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, after our family feud here, um, we were thinking about a lot of different movies, different actors and actresses out there. But there's a really cool movie coming out, um, if it's not already out, and it's called The
It
Dark
is already
Tower.
out.
Yep, called The Dark Tower. Thanks, Steve. And
It's already out, Greg.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
Okay. So bottom line, Dark Tower is out. Other people have seen it. I haven't seen it yet, so I guess it's not out for me yet. But when the boss of me says I can go see it, that's what I'm gonna go do. Um, and so with that being said, we're looking at the different actors in it, and two of the primary actors in this film are Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey. And so we decided, hey, let's look at these guys a little closer. Let's look at the movies that they've been in and some movies that we enjoyed them being in. So that's what our show is about tonight, talking about Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba, the movies they were in, their actors themselves, and the anticipation for this movie that's currently out in Dark Tower. So, Karen, Steve, what do you think about, first of all, the actors themselves? Did you find films that you enjoyed that basically showcase both actors?
Who do you want to talk first?
Oh, you're already talking?
I
Oh, oh, okay.
did.
Um. Well.
Steve says,
Well.
like I had a
This.
choice.
Whatever. Um. This assignment was a little odd for me because I really like Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey as actors. I think they're both, really terrific actors. But when I look at their filmographies, their respective, you know, works of film, I didn't find a lot that I liked. I got to be honest.
Wow, that's
Uh,
tough room already.
yeah, I guess I'm a tough room. I mean, there's some films that I liked Matthew McConaughey in, but there's so many more that I didn't like him in. And mainly because I think, especially early in his career, he tended to be in relatively weak vehicles. They were romantic, there were a number of comedies, sort of light fare, nothing that really required huge acting chops. They sort of traded on his good looks. Um, and it's only, I mean, he took a 2-year hiatus from acting at one point. And I want to say it was like around 2000, is there in the early 2000s, he took a hiatus from acting because he wanted to engineer a shift in his career from the pretty boy roles that he was getting to much more serious, much more meaty, challenging roles. And I think he was successful in doing that. And his later works just require, I mean, they really show off his acting chops as an actor. But in terms of like the films themselves, I'm still not necessarily finding a whole lot that I like, that I particularly want to go out of my way to see. Um, and with Idris Elba, I mean, again, I mean, to me, what brought him to my attention was his work on The Wire. That was just really compelling work. But his movies, to me, aren't all that compelling. Um, I mean, they tend to be violent, they tend to be really dark. So it's not the kind of material that I'm going to seek out necessarily. Luther, I mean, some of the work that he's done as a television actor, The Wire, Luther would be another example. Just, really interesting work, but I couldn't even get through all of Luther because that was too dark. And some of the movies, I mean, nah, they're not, they weren't like really like the type of subject matter that would just make me go out of my way to see them, even though I think for the most part, he as an actor delivers the goods in the roles that he's asked to play. They're just not necessarily roles that I want to see him play.
Okay, well, that's pretty good, Karen, assessment. Because I think I feel the same way for the majority part. There are some films, and again, I guess I like action-packed thrillers, and I don't mind so much the gore and the violence so much. But at the same time, I agree with you also in the sense that these guys are really good actors, and you can tell, and that's maybe that paradox of being, yeah, that's too bad because of the films that some of the films they're in are not as good as the actors that are in them, and not just them, but some of the supporting actors too as well. Um, but what I really liked about what you said about the TV series after the shameless plug was, um, you said The Wire,
Well, that's what he was in.
but so were you.
But I never said that.
I know. I said it was a shameless plug. It was just a joke. It was right. Uh, but yeah, I agree, and I like Luther a lot. And I actually sat through all of the TV series, because actually that's an Idris Elba series. He's a producer
Right.
and of that show, and I really like his character in that show. But it is very dark. There's no doubt about that. But well, with that being said, Karen, why don't you go ahead and tell us the films that you were contemplating to talk about today, and let us hear your opinion about those. And did they actually, if they didn't cut the mustard, or what's the term? It's not cut the mustard. It's but anyway, if they didn't quite catch your fancy, what is it about them that didn't, or if they were some movies that you would actually suggest to our audience?
Well, okay. I guess I'll start with Matthew McConaughey first. I, like I said, I really like him as an actor, and the movies that I picked to talk about, because, like I said, there weren't necessarily a lot of vehicles that I specifically liked, even though I like him as an actor. So I picked one movie is called Two for the Money. It was, or the one movie I want to talk about is called Two for the Money. It was a 2005 movie, and actually Matthew McConaughey played a supporting role in this movie, even though Al Pacino was the star of the movie, even though Two for the Money is really about Matthew McConaughey's character. He played a man named Brandon Lee, and Two for the Money is actually based on Brandon Lee's real life story. Two for the Money is about this guy who had a promising football career but got sidelined by an injury. So he ends up doing like 1-900 phone calls, doing that kind of thing. And while I think he was doing it in Vegas. And while he was doing that, he was also just sort of like pontificating on sports teams, and who, if you were a betting person, who would you bet on? And people started listening to him, and they were surprised at how right he was. Like, he was right like maybe 80% of the time or something like that. So he's sort of, spouting off in Vegas, and he comes to the attention of Al Pacino's character. And Al Pacino's character runs sort of like a sports advice business, because sports betting is illegal. Al Pacino's business is based in New York, where sports betting is illegal. But somehow he manages to get around the illegality by sort of putting like a middleman in between the betting, the actual betting and the bookie. So Al Pacino's company wasn't really the bookie, it was some other person was the bookie, and they're just providing advice. And it was really weird how, and didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of how he got around it. But anyway, for the purposes of the movie, they got around that little problem. But Al Pacino is sort of like this larger than life character. And what other kind of character does Al Pacino play? Has he ever played a wallflower? I think not. But anyway, he plays this sort of larger than life character who, you know, just has built this business from the ground up, and he's got a great wife and he's got a great child, and he lives, eats and breathes sports. And he takes Matthew McConaughey's character, Brandon Lee, I want to say his last name is Lee, under his wing to sort of grooms him. Matthew McConaughey's character is really kind of a fall off the turnip truck kind of guy, not very polished, but brilliant in terms of like predicting what's happening, especially in football, what's going to happen. So, you know, Al Pacino's like, you know, let me show you the way this business is really run. And, you know, he gets him cleaned up and polished and, you know, changes his name to Johnny Diamond or something like that. So he becomes this brand, a marketable brand. And everything's going fine because and he's making Al Pacino's firm a huge amount of money until he's stops making the right predictions. Like he runs into a really bad and a really long streak of crappy calls on the teams, and it threatens to bring the whole enterprise crumbling down around him. In the meantime, Al Pacino's character has a bad heart, and then Rene Russo is like this hairdresser, but also his doting wife, and you know, her character, as usual in these types of films, is the least developed, in my opinion. But anyway, that's basically the nuts of the story. Why did I like this movie? Because I like the electricity or the chemistry between Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino. And maybe it's sort of, I mean, this was 2005, so Matthew McConaughey was probably trying to get out of his I'm just a pretty boy phase, but hadn't really made it into the I can do Dallas Buyers Club phase yet. So I think it takes a certain amount of malleability to be in the same room with Al Pacino, completely overwhelmed by him, and let Al Pacino take the lead, which is what he does. He sucks up all the air in the room. So how do you let somebody suck up all the air in the room but not get sucked out of the room at the same time? Mm-hmm. And Matthew McConaughey manages to do that by forging this bond, like a palpable likability between these two characters, and also a healthy fear on Matthew McConaughey's part that was exemplified, and it made it believable. So I really liked the movie, and I guess I sort of like the idea of, you know, this movie just dealt with a lot of ethical issues. I mean, at one point in the movie, it's Brandon Lang, not Brandon Lee. Brandon Lang is the real life person. But there are all kinds of addictions that go on in this movie. There's the football addiction, there's the gambling addiction, there's the drinking addiction. Al Pacino's character is I think if he's not a recovering alcoholic, I think he is a recovering alcoholic, and his wife is a recovering alcoholic. And when Al Pacino's character is at a Gamblers Anonymous meeting at one point in the movie, he says to everybody, "You're not addicted to winning, you're addicted to losing." And he said, that's how you know you're alive, after you've lost everything. And then you say, well, at least I'm still alive. It makes you feel alive. That's the feeling that you're addicted to. That's why you keep gambling. And I thought that was pretty interesting take. on those characters and just the way that they live their lives. They're on the edge and they want to feel something. They're trying to feel like these little things matter. And if you feel like you're losing everything, I mean, you know, one day you have a house and take the house for granted, but then a tornado comes along and sweeps the house away. All of a sudden, you're not taking that house for granted anymore. All of a sudden, it's like you are just grateful on a molecular level for the house, you know, or for the house that you get after the tornado. So that's sort of what's going on here. And sort of like this older man taking this younger man under his wing and sort of forging kind of a father-son relationship, although it's not really clear that that's what's going on, but maybe kind of it sort of is. So I just thought the chemistry between them was just rose to the level. And in terms of how the critics like this movie, I mean, they really didn't. It sort of was considered like a middling movie in terms of critical interest. They thought that it was sort of like a poor man's Devil's Advocate, or that kind, and like not enough going on to really bring it up to the level of Devil's Advocate. It wasn't campy enough to really be an alternative to Devil's Advocate, and it wasn't exciting enough. You know, it's like if you needed to care about football to care about this movie. That's what some critics said. Now, I'm not a football addict. I do like sports, especially in person. I will go to almost any type of game. So I like the idea of football, and I've watched a number of them over the years. So, you know, so for me, this movie was easy to watch.
Okay. So would you suggest this movie to be seen by our public?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not the greatest movie ever made. I got to be honest. It's, you know, it's an okay movie, but if you want to see Mathew McConaughey in not the pretty boy, you know, failure to launch type role or the wedding planner type role, if you want to see him in something else and especially where he's not the star, but he's really the supporting character. He does really well with that. And I think for somebody who's like an A-list star, and I guess at this point we would call him an A-list star. I mean, he's won an Academy Award after all. He also does very well in supporting roles. He knows how not to sort of be like the personality. He knows how to get into the role and be whatever that role calls him to be. And it may be the small person or the person who's not as easily noticed. And he's fine with that. He's very good in that way. I would say he's much better at that than Al Pacino is, because I just don't think of Al Pacino doing that well in terms of supporting roles. He's okay, but he's Mr. I will suck all the room all the air out of this room in a New York minute. That's what he does.
Okay. Well, thank you. How about you, Steve? Would you give us one of the movies that you were looking at and tell us what you thought about it, but also give us the actor between the two and why you picked this movie to show this particular actor?
Wow, Karen. My impression of McConaughey is a little bit different than Karen's. I do agree with him being a better supporting actor than a lot of the major stars out there. He does very well sharing the room with people. He gives them room to breathe and room to bring their acting chops out. It's almost like he magnifies people that he's in the room with. He makes actors that are good but not great better. But you kind of gave him this pretty boy image all the way to 2005 and how he did movies based off of good looks and stuff like that. And of course, you know, he played a bunch of those because he does have that look that a lot of people would really go toward. But before 2005, you have Contact, the Newtown Boys. You have what was the other one I just saw? Amistad, and the movie that I want to talk about right now is A Time to Kill. These are, as some of them have little edges of bereft from the drama that surrounds the movies, but A Time to Kill really doesn't do that. A Time to Kill has is a dramatic criminal criminology. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? The criminal type movie. Very suspenseful, very dramatic, start to finish. It doesn't really give you any room for relief. There's until the very end of the movie. It's set in the 1980s in Canton, Mississippi, and it deals with a major problem that's still a major problem now, but it definitely was in a boiling point during the 70s and 80s when it came to racism. Um, a girl, Samuel L. Jackson, the movie stars Sandra Bullock, Samuel L. Jackson, Oliver Platt, Matthew McConaughey, Kiefer and Donald Sutherland, Kevin Spacey. The list goes on and on of an all-star cast for this movie, and each one of them definitely brings a uniqueness that they're known for. But you've got actors like McConaughey who are really starting to hit their stride in movies here in 95. And this was kind of a huge debut for him to really prove that he was going to be here to stay. McConaughey plays a lawyer. At the very beginning of the movie, Samuel L. Jackson's daughter is kidnapped and beaten and raped by two white supremacists. Of course, they're arrested, and of course, they go to court. But Samuel L. Jackson calling McConaughey's character for advice, for assurance that they're going to receive the justice that they deserve. McConaughey believes that they're going to be able to get off scot-free, and believing he has to take matters into his own hands, Samuel L. Jackson kills the two whites, the two boys that raped and beat his daughter. His daughter did end up surviving at the very beginning of the movie, but she is in a very critical condition, and she is dealing with a lot of problems at this point. And this is where the movie starts to pick up, and this is where the movie really gets in the crux of what it's trying to go for, what it's trying to portray. This father who felt like he had to take matters into his own hands because he believed he was not going to receive justice for his true justice for the crime that was committed against his family, is about to stand trial in front of an all-white jury in Mississippi, with literally everyone against him, and even his lawyer, who is played by McConaughey, believing that he might not have a shot to win this case. But Samuel L. Jackson, though losing what little faith he has day by day, really tries to drive the point home of McConaughey being the only person that can help him, that can save him, and that can ensure that justice is really handed down. And the acting that McConaughey portrays, I think, is the best. I think it's better than Dallas Buyers Club, but it's really close. Really close in that making a believable character that you feel for, that you understand, that really jumps off the screen and fills you with the emotion that they're going through every single time. And this movie is definitely, it's one of my top 5 movies. I think it's amazing time period piece, and it's something that they've slowly started to make more movies about, so people can understand exactly what was going on during that period of time. But it's something that everybody needs to see so they can understand, and we can learn from past mistakes, and move forward into the future.
Yeah. So his character in the film as a lawyer, how did you think he portrayed that lawyer, and did you think he was believable?
Um, I would say Karen would know more than me. Um, I would say, in my opinion, of lawyers that I've met, people that have been around, cases that I've watched, and not just talking about, watching Law and Order or anything like that. But he seems very genuine. He seems very believable. He seems like he takes true care and consideration, though it's not really seen as much early on. By the middle point of the film, you truly believe that he's everything he can to help his client and ensure that everything goes the way it should. And he's believable to me.
I think he's pretty believable too. I mean, he actually, when he was in school, when he was in college, he actually started out as pre-law. And it was only at sort of like a weird intersection that he decided to change to focus on acting. So he's had a very strong interest in the law for, throughout his whole life. And so I think, yeah, I mean, I think he does a lot of research on lawyer characters like the Lincoln lawyer, which I think we'll talk about at another point. I mean, he did a lot of research for that. I think he did research in A Time to Kill. So when he plays these lawyers, I think it's because I think there is a certain amount of believability because he's actually interested and does the research, which, evidences that interest. And I will say too, I mean, when I was talking about the statements I made were sort of based on things that he said about his own career. So yeah, I mean, it's not that he only did pretty boy roles until the 2000s. He definitely did other stuff, but he wasn't satisfied with the direction that his career was going because of the majority. So speaking generalities, not necessarily specifics.
Greg?
Yes.
Who would you like to start off with?
Well, I think we'll just keep it going on Matthew McConaughey, and also the present theme, lawyers. Karen mentioned the Lincoln lawyer. So for me, I've had a really, um, I guess, a good, if not great, love affair for the writer of this character in the Lincoln Lawyer, the movie The Lincoln Lawyer, where uh, Matthew McConaughey plays Mickey Haller, which is a character in a novel series that um, was written by Michael Connelly, and I'm a real big fan of Michael Connelly's books. And what's interesting about his books is he has different series of books, but he finds a way to tie them all in with the characters that show up in the books and do um, appearances in each of these series. And so Mickey Haller is the half brother of Harry Bosch, which is a TV series that Michael Connelly has on Netflix, on Amazon, excuse me, Amazon Originals, and it's a really good detective series. So here we have an attorney, a lawyer who actually does business out of the Lincoln um, um, automobile, and he comes across a case in this particular film where there's a wealthy real estate guy who ends up harming or allegedly harming and uh, assaulting a prostitute in such a way that it's kind of very heinous and harsh. So he's in this case. He's one of those guys. He's flashy. He went in and out of the case. He has a friend in the as a bailiff in the Bell's Bondsman friend in John Leguizamo, which is another great actor. This film boasts also a lot of phenomenal actors and actresses. In this one, we have Marissa Tomei, we have Ryan Phillippe, one of my favorite actors, William H. Macy, Josh Lucas, and as I alluded to, John Leguizamo. So just to name a few, and Bryan Cranston, who is um, uh, career has really bloomed in the last 10 years. So just a really good cast of people. And again, just like in the previous movie where he was a lawyer, I actually he was very believable as a lawyer in my opinion, as well in this particular film. This film has a lot of twists and turns, but I thought Matthew McConaughey shows well in this movie. And this is probably to me, one of his better films as well. Um, and of course, being a fan of Michael Connolly, that didn't hurt matters, of course. But I think this particular film, which is pretty interesting, we see a very a transition of character for this particular lawyer, where he's more of the not totally an ambulance chaser, but he has a series of different clients that he has that are kind of shady and kind of trying to stay under the wire by having him as a lawyer. And I mean, the movie kind of starts where this biker gang is like behind him, and it ends up being one of his clients just coming to visit him and talk to him about a case and give him some money about one of their their own that's being prosecuted. So um, it's one of those things. So now he's on a case where things are not quite the same, and so he's got to be in the courtroom a little bit more. He's got to do a little bit more research because things aren't quite right. And then he realizes that this case has something to do with another client that he has, and so now he gets more and more involved. And it goes from just being a representing this guy to representing now a guy who he doesn't even like, and a guy who he's beginning to dislike more and more. And then some other people in his life are starting to be impacted, and so he gets more and more involved. So this movie does a really good way of turning things around a little bit from this kind of showy kind of Lincoln lawyer showing up, getting the case done, making deals and all that kind of stuff, to a guy who's now he's paying attention. Now he understands that there's a lot more involved than he thought it was. Now he changes his way of thinking. And then there's some transitional things in the film that make him even that much more impassioned and that much more um, focused on trying to now go from defending someone to actually trying to prosecute someone. To it's a really a total turnaround. And so that's what I really like about this film. And I really like Matthew McConaughey's character in it, and I think he did a really good job. His emotion that he shows, the change of his psyche, you can see that change. And I think that's really good when it comes to acting, because you want to see the actor go through certain emotions. But in this one, it's not just emotional, it's just a total change of thinking and a total change of how he has to be. He goes from being very, very confident to apprehensive and now looking over his shoulder because of how things have transpired and how they've changed so much in this film. So I would recommend this film to anybody. It's a really good film to watch, and this is one of those crime drama thrillers. And uh, I thought Matthew McConaughey held his own, and even that much more. He was very convincing, and I love the transition in this film.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Cool.
Karen, why don't you throw us another curveball?
Well, okay. Well, there is another film I said I was going to mention just, briefly. One of my favorite movies that has Matthew McConaughey in it is a movie called Lone Star from 1996, where Matthew McConaughey had another supporting role, a small role this time, or relatively small role, playing Billy Deeds, who was the father of one of the main characters of the movie. And you sort of see him in flashbacks. And Lone Star is one of my favorite movies just because I just think it's so well done. It exudes atmosphere. It's set in Texas, and there's just like this sort of drama that just, or not drama, it's almost like a pallor that just settles over everything because it's Texas and there's a mystery, there's a murder. And, we're not really sure who the dead body is, but then as it turns out, it's it's Billy Deeds, and well, how did that happen? And then there are these flashbacks that go on because the current sheriff in Lone Star is tasked with finding out exactly what happened. And they're just, these interesting characters and subplots that go on. Samuel Jackson's wife, LaTanya Richardson, has a supporting role in this movie. Who else is in this movie? Well, yeah, right. Chris Cooper, and this movie actually made Chris Cooper a star. He was working. I mean, he could have gone to the grocery store until this movie came out, and then I guess he had to stop going to the grocery store because too many people recognized him. And I believe he was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance in this movie, and he might have even won. So Chris Christopherson is in this movie, and just all these other really good actors. And the movie is who directed this movie? I have to tell you who did, because he's a famous director. And I forgot to mention, yes, Elizabeth Payne. I knew Elizabeth Payne was in this movie. Let's see. Okay, John Sayles, of course. John Sayles wrote the movie and he directed the movie. And he just did, I just thought he did an amazing job. And again, this is one of those movies where Matthew McConaughey is playing a sheriff, and he is very believable as the sheriff. His walk changes, the cadence of his language has changed, and he has this kind of sly, kind of, I don't know, Texas drawl kind of look to him. And he just kind of carries that off to great effect, I think. And it's not because he has a huge role. It's just but he was very memorable. I mean, I remember him very distinctly from this movie. And he was not a huge star when he did this movie. So
now, ironically, there's a cross comparison, but a cross support here. In the Lone Star, you have Chris Cooper is the primary character who's tasked to find out about deeds, and then with Matthew McConaughey as the supporting actor, and then in the movie that Steven spoke about, Chris Cooper is a supporting actor. He's the one who truly helps the case turn on its axis, because he knew that Samuel L. Jackson's character did not mean to shoot him. He was just caught in the crossfire of Samuel L. Jackson trying to kill the other two gentlemen, and yet
they weren't gentlemen.
I was loosely gentlemen. Those two
guys, no, not even loosely.
Those two guys.
Cretan.
Okay, those two Cretan guys. That were, Chris Cooper's character was just caught in the crossfire. He was a sheriff in that film as well, and then Matthew McConaughey was the star of that movie. So it's really cool to see the switch and change between who's the main character and who's the supporting actor in both those two films, and both those two films being very, very good. Because I saw Lone Star too, and it's a really good movie.
Excellent movie. I would highly recommend seeing that movie. It just takes you on a journey, and it's just such a lovely journey.
It is. Okay, Steve, do you have anything for Idris Elba, maybe?
I actually do. I'm going to get into my, movies that I enjoy watching, my kind of guilty pleasure-ish style of movie. This movie actually did really well for the genre that it falls into. Elvis, the movie came out in 2013. It's called Pacific Rim.
Oh, got a little
And
sci-fi in there.
got a little
Man,
sci-fi in there.
you were not
I'm
kidding
a
when you said guilty pleasure.
guilty pleasure. But this is a movie that was highly rated. It was Ebert gave it a 4 out of 4. Rotten Tomatoes gives it, which I don't like Rotten Tomatoes at all. They gave it a 71%. Audience score gave it a 77%. This was a movie that for 2013 was a kind of an upper tier movie and directed by Guillermo del Toro. It's actually to date, it was his highest. Uh, it was his grossing movie at the time, and the genre that I grew up loving, which was kind of not looked at very well. Of course, we had Godzilla and then King Kong, and they were just superficial sci-fi movies that you went and enjoyed, but you didn't really get behind and you didn't really keep up with for the ridiculous things that they kind of became.
Sure.
But it showed that it still carries a lot of weight in the American market and in the worldwide market. Idris Elba plays actually a leader of what's called the Jaeger program. In the Pacific Ocean, this rift tears up, and it's a dimensional gate that leads these things called kaiju into our world. And they
Mhm.
come up through the Pacific Ocean, they attack everything on the coast, and they are monstrous, colossal beasts. It takes them roughly 6 days to put down the first one. You know,
6 days.
yeah, 6 days to put down the first one that comes through the rift using our normal, fighter jets and missiles and tanks and everything at our disposal. Well, then they slowly start to come up with a program called the Jaeger program, which is where they build these colossal giant robots, which is where we truly get into the crux of sci-fi fantasy, which are piloted by people in order to beat these things back. Well, over a period of time, the kaiju keep coming faster and faster, and it's a closer and closer together. Society, the world nations have decided to build walls instead of investing in the Jaeger program to try to keep the kaiju out and keep their major cities safe. But at the very beginning of the movie, you learn that these walls are nothing to these monsters, and they end up tearing through cities anyway. And Elba's character, I got his name here somewhere. Pentecost. Pentecost. Stacker Pentecost, which is just the oddest fantasy name ever made. He's the leader of this program who is really trying to get the world to invest more, to understand that the Jaeger program is what's actually, doing the job to try to keep humanity as safe as they possibly can. But with the kaiju coming faster and faster through this gate, they can't stop them. He's a very stoic, strong character. He doesn't give off very much emotion. He is for the mission. He is for getting the job done and saving the world, and he is really willing to do anything to get that job done. Even he used to be a Jaeger pilot, and he's going through problems with the radioactive materials that they used to use originally for the program. So he has literally put his body on the line and his mind and his life to try to save humanity. So him being a hard, no nonsense character, you kind of feel for him and that he has to portray that. Del Toro even stated um, this was a movie that contained more dialogue than he was really used to putting in a movie. He helped write it. He helped do the screenplay, directing, all of that, and he wanted somebody that are the main character, which is Charlie Hunnam, which anybody would know from who's ever seen Sons of Anarchy. He's in the new King Arthur movie as the lead character, but somebody that you could sit there and believe when he says sit down and shut up, and somebody that you really want to hear the dialogue come from. And Elba does a really good job of portraying that character, but was showing hints when it comes to Mako, which is his surrogate daughter. in the movie, which is also a part of the Jaeger program. He has small bits of openness with her, but as soon as that goes away, he goes back to being his serious. We have to do this. We're saving the world. We're risking our lives, and everything has to be perfect. And he does a great job. Uh, he almost comes off as he truly does have the weight of the fate and the weight of the world on his shoulders. And every decision he makes is, life threatening to literal billions of people.
Hmm.
So,
And to be able to have that kind of weight on
it
your shoulders is crazy.
yeah, it's it's impressive the job he does, and you kind of hang on the words that come out of his mouth, and you really pay true attention to the scenes that he's in.
Wow. I wasn't, I haven't seen the movie yet, and I was toying with watching it, but then other things that I know that I'm a little bit more prone to be interested in. I was, going to those things, but after your description, I think I'm going to watch it. So thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
Cool.
Well, I too have an Idris Elba movie. It did not necessarily, crash the box office anywhere, but it is a pretty decent movie. It has a lot of good actors in it. The late um, Paul Walker is in this film, who I thought was a really up and coming actor, um, and especially the last 5 or 6 years. Um, but that's the premise of this particular film. We're talking about a group of guys who are together. In many cases, they are friends and good acquaintances, but they're really together because they are trying to pull off some of the biggest and most strategic bank robberies of the millennium, we'll say. And they're out to get a certain amount of money. They have a plan. They have it put together. They're trying to get these things done, and so they're doing these things gradually. They're really good at what they do. They don't leave any traces, um, and it's just a really solid bank robbing crew. Now, the movie that I'm referring to came out in 2010, and this movie is called Takers, which is, I guess, very poignant. They're taking from the banks. But the one thing that they don't count on, that actually there's two things that they don't count on, primary things. One, a very dogged detective who is his mission seemingly in life to catch these criminals because he's intrigued because they don't leave very much for him to grasp on to. The dogged detective is Matt Dillon. He plays Jack Wells, excuse me, and he is just it's just his mission to find these guys. And as they make small mistakes, he keeps those things and he builds on those things, and he's after them. It's just plain and simple. The other thing that they don't count on is a former colleague of theirs getting out of prison and coming with the biggest score that they've ever heard of and trying to help them put this together. And the irony about this is they don't totally trust him, but that at the same time, you know, what he's bringing to them, they look at and think that they can maybe pull this off. And with his help, they'll be able to do that. The other thing that they don't count on is betrayal, and so betrayal is always the killer in many of these things. But alongside Idris Elba in this film is Chris Brown, the singer, who does a really good job of acting in this film. We have Hayden Christensen, who we should know from the Star Wars films. Michael Ealy, really good actor. Stephen Harris, a good actor out of Chicago. And then T.I., who is the one that causes that uneasiness and that eventual betrayal. He gets rich while they take the fall. And then, of course, the late, great Paul Walker. Now, Idris Elba in this film, just like anything else, he's the guy in this particular film. He's the peacemaker. He's the guy that kind of helps keep things together. He's the very quiet, kind of calm that they need in order to not, go crazy and do strange things. Because a lot of these guys are still a little wild. But he's the voice of reason. But every person who has uh, these great qualities also has a dark side, or a side that causes them issue. In this film, with all the different portrayals, especially that brought on by T.I.'s character in this film, um, Idris Elba has a crutch, and it's his sister, who's a drug addict. And I'm gonna try to make sure I pronounce her name correctly. Marianne Jean Baptiste, very good actress. I love her, and she's on a TV series now that's really good. She's a police TV series, and she's just a really good actress. So she plays a drug addict, and it's his sister, and he's trying to keep her off drugs. He's trying to keep her straight. She wants to hang around him, but he can't let her hang around because of all the things that they're involved in. Yet he still, does what he can to try to be around her. She gets hold of some information by accident, listening to them talking, and so now she has information that could lead to not just them being captured, but even them being killed. And so in this movie, that's his crutch is his sister. And I think Idris Elba again shows his wares in this film. Although his part is poignant, he doesn't have as many lines in here as other people in the film, but his presence is totally known. His presence is definitely needed in the film to be the catalyst of other things going on between the different characters. He's kind of the glue for all the characters in this film. And when things go totally awry, they look to him to try to help, you know, bring things back to light and get them to safety. At least that's what they're hoping is going to happen. But there's so many different aspects and so many different things in this film that try to prevent that. So Takers is a really good film. It's a great robbery movie, especially for modern day techniques, we'll say. Um, it's a great movie to watch the portrayal just manifest itself right in front of your eyes. So I think this is a great movie. Again, it didn't have a big box office, but I think Idris Elba helps this film, along with Paul Walker and Matt Dillon, really, to get this film really moving in the right direction, and in my opinion. So I would advise everybody this is a good film to watch, especially if you like some thrills and some good detective work and betrayal. This is a big movie about the betrayal. So that's my last movie for the night, you guys. Um, we're getting kind of long in the tooth here, guys, and so I think we're gonna just maybe if you have any
What
other
about my
movies to mention.
movie? I didn't do Idris Elba.
Okay, Karen, we
Oh,
were kind of looking at your time frame for us, so we were
no, I
just trying
know,
to help
but I
you.
didn't get to do mine.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and let you do three movies.
You
Go
were
ahead and get
so
your
you were
Idris
so
Elba
proud of
movie.
Matthew McConaughey. We figured that's what you were going with.
No, no, I want to mention my movie about Idris Elba too.
Well,
Um,
go for it.
okay.
You have three
Uh,
seconds.
oh, great. Okay. The movie I want to talk about was done in 2009. It's called Obsessed. Um, and this is like I said at the beginning, there aren't a whole. I couldn't find a whole lot of movies starring Idris Elba that I actually liked. I did go to the movies to see Obsessed, and I really liked Idris Elba in the movie. But the movie has so many problems; it's hard to remember that I actually liked Idris Elba in this movie. I mean, the movie is kind of a train wreck. It's like a tepid Fatal Attraction, like Fatal Unattraction, I guess, or it's just not a very good example of that type of movie where you've got the man who may or may not have done his spouse wrong, and the other woman who just manages to get into their lives. How, I don't know. But anyway, this movie stars Beyonce Knowles as Idris Elba's wife. Idris Elba plays this guy named Derek, who's an investment banker, and his star is on the rise. He's assigned to some very lucrative contracts, and he's very good at what he does. And Beyonce's character was an assistant at the investment firm, but they got involved and they got married. So she's like a stay-at-home mom, and they just had a little baby. So he's just deliriously happy and things just couldn't be better until this temp comes to work at his firm one day, and he doesn't really pay attention to her, but she just decides that she sets her sights on him, and he is trying to be nice but doesn't quite say no when she flirts with him, and when she makes suggestive comments, he doesn't shut it down immediately because he's trying to be a nice guy, but but also he's not interested in him. He's not interested in her. And in this investment banking firm, there are no women who actually do investment banking. The women are all assistants, which is annoying in 2009. I mean, how far do we have to get into the 21st century before that changes? But anyway, so no women are investment bankers. And you have all these men who, see this temp walking around and they're like, "Ooh, she's really hot," or "Wow, she's amazing." I'm like, really, guys? Because, I mean, I guess she's attractive, but she's really skinny. So why you think that's all that, I don't understand. But anyway, but I'm not a guy, which is why.
Well, understand it's acting. She got the role, so yeah, they're gonna say that.
Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, the temp just, keeps finding ways to sort of just like be there, even though she was only supposed to be there for 2 days. She manages to stretch that into 2 weeks, and Idris Elba's assistant is actually a male, but he mysteriously gets sick and can't return to work, so the temp has to take over. And then she just starts becoming more and more obvious with her affections, and then she won't take no for an answer, and she's popping up into his car, wearing just like underwear, and she's getting she gets into their house and kidnaps the baby, but then brings the baby back, and and it's a bad movie. But how, Steve, you were talking about guilty pleasures? This was kind of a guilty pleasure for me, and I'm sorry, I am guilty. I'm so guilty. But I did go see this movie, and I did enjoy it for what it was, which was like total fluff. There's nothing great about this movie at all. But if you just want like a fun kind of movie to watch that's entirely predictable, this is your cup of tea. This definitely fits the bill. It's completely predictable. It's completely stock. There's nothing. It does not plow any new ground at all. Yeah. But if you want to see some crazy movie about some psychotic temp, this might be the one. I guess the characters themselves are very one-dimensional. Idris Elba's character is good, and he's only good. That's it. I mean, he really doesn't have an affair, and he really, is telling the truth, even though nobody believes him. And there are all these weird things that happen, and nobody believes him. The cops don't believe him. His wife doesn't believe him. But, he's just this good guy who's just like buffeted. Also kind of a stupid guy for an investment banker, because I'm like, you didn't see this coming from a mile away? What is wrong with you? And Beyonce Knowles is like, she's like the strong woman, but she's, still a stay-at-home wife. And, and she says, well, I want to go back to school, but God knows in what. Um, Nothing to see there. And then the temp is just, the typical psychotic, crazy, I can't take no for an answer person who, again, one dimensional, there's no subtlety there at all. Um, so yeah, totally guilty pleasure. But it was fun to watch anyway.
It's definitely a cross between. Well, it's definitely like the movie The Temp,
Well,
and
except worse,
Hands That Rock the Cradle combined,
except worse.
Mm.
except
Way
worse.
worse. Not nearly as good as either one. I mean, The Hand That Rocked the Cradle, Rebecca De Mornay definitely elevated that movie.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty
And
good movie.
the temp, who starred in the temp? Was that, I can't remember who starred in the temp, but
Mm,
that actress still, I mean, that was sort of like the iconic version of that particular movie. And this was just sort of lukewarm. There was like this fight there's this fight, which is like huge, but also completely improbable. So, um, anyway, it's fun to see. It was fun for me to see Idris Elba and like not playing like some evil, dark, scary dude, but like just like an impossibly nice guy. I mean, this wasn't any more realistic than the scary dark dudes he normally plays, but still, like it's at the opposite end of the spectrum. So that's why I brought it up. The other movie of his that I really liked and actually liked far more is called Zootopia, and he played Chief Bogo in this movie. And I liked his performance. He was a voice actor in this movie. I liked his performance for a couple of reasons. One, we got to hear his lovely English accent. I mean, the man's from London. He was born and bred in London, and you would think he was brought up on the south side of Baltimore or the east side of Baltimore or the, you know, born and bred in the United States. But no, the man's not American at all. He's British. He's a Brit. And it's really nice to hear that British accent um, in in this movie. And I love the character of Chief Bogo, who I think Chief Bogo was like a buffalo or
He's a water
something.
Water
buffalo.
buff.
Water buffalo, yes. So he's supposed to be like really mean and really stern, but he has a heart of gold, and he's so darn cute, for a water buffalo. So, and like the rabbit in the movie just completely unnerves him, but he's struggling to be fair in a very chaotic, unpredictable world, which just resonates so much today. So, and I thought Idris Elba did a good job of bringing that little bit of nuance. So it's like he's like the big burly water buffalo, but his heart's in the right place. So you kind of root for him too. I mean, you want him to do the right thing, and to be right and to help. And so that's nice. So that's why I like this movie.
Well, one thing to bring up too, Idris Elba, and also too in Takers, he also speaks in his regular British Cockney kind of accent, so his natural verbiage in that movie too, um, and
The
also in
Losers.
Losers, also in Losers, but which is another decent movie, and Idris Elba's character there switches gears in right in the middle of the movie, and it's not something that you expect. But also another good movie. Idris Elba is one of the very fortunate few that are out there and is a part of the Marvel universe. Samuel L. Jackson is in there too, who's probably making more money than everybody on the planet right now. But Idris Elba is in a lot of the Thor movies because he's the gatekeeper. Um, he's also in Ghost Rider as a spirit in Ghost Rider. Other good films that he's in, um, he has not so necessarily big parts, but poignant parts in many other films as well. I.e., the film with Denzel Washington, American Gangster.
American Gangster.
Yeah, where he plays a very small role, but it's a poignant role. and it's a role where transition occurs in the film. So this is just a really good actor, just hands down, and he proves it every time he gets on stage. How he changes the persona, how he helps to the film get to its poignant points. So a very big fan of Idris Elba and a very big fan of Matthew McConaughey. Um,
Well, the interesting thing about Idris Elba too is that he never really had formal acting training. He was in a school that focused on the arts, but he dropped out. And he was in the music business. He worked as a DJ, and then he just sort of like got into auditioning while he was DJing, and he landed roles on British soap operas in his early 20s, and the rest, as they say, is history. So, for some, I mean, to not have any formal training to be as good as he is quite something. I mean, it kind of reminds me of James Woods, another person who had no formal training as an actor, but became known as a brilliant actor in spite of that.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a classic Hollywood actor, and Robert Mitchum was the same way. He was not an actor. He came about it very um, auspiciously, and so too his brother, and both of them were able to work in Hollywood for decades. So yeah, I guess it doesn't mean that you have to have formal training for anything if you have the ability to understand and comprehend what's necessary to do the role. So yeah, I think that in itself is another kudo for him as far as his acting career has been so far. So, yeah, and again, Matthew McConaughey too, just one of my favorite actors out there in the films. And I saw him in a movie called Mud, Matthew McConaughey, and the movie itself was kind of bizarre and weird, but and he was kind of bizarre and weird in it, but it was a good bizarre weird, and so still liked him in that movie too. So, um, I just hope that in the future, and especially now that The Dark Tower is out, this is a Stephen King film. That Dark Tower is out, that we can actually see the two of them together, see how well they rise in this film, and whether or not they continue to wow us with their acting prowess.
Well, unfortunately, The Dark Tower is not exactly wowing the box office. It's doing marginally better than Dunkirk at this point, but Dunkirk's been out for, had pre, was pre, was out at
Preceded it.
2 weeks, preceded it is what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Preceded it by at least a couple of weeks. So Dark Tower is expected to just like completely like win over the box office significantly, like be much further ahead of Dunkirk than it landed on. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how long. I mean, I think it's still going to be in the movies for a while, but maybe not as long as originally planned because the box office doesn't seem to be supporting it.
That's too bad.
The
The book reads pretty
it
well.
it could fall into one of those where the box office hit isn't there, but for some reason it just takes off after the fact.
Could. That's possible.
So,
But there's
but
not that much buzz about the Dark Tower. I mean, right now, I hear people talking about that movie like you got to go see the Dark Tower. I was excited about the Dark Tower before the Dark Tower came out, but now that the Dark Tower's out, I don't hear anybody talking about the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
They're talking about Dunkirk.
friends of mine actually did go see it on the fourth, so I'm going to ask her what she thought. Um, but prior to it, the buzz was huge. So I wonder what happened.
mhm.
So I'm gonna see what I can do to try to see the film in the near future, and maybe I can report back to you guys and also to you out there watching us on what I thought and what I experienced in viewing the movie. So,
Yeah, me too.
well, I guess this is a good time to get out of here. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to us and watching us show here on the Real Point of View. And we hope to bring you more films and interesting commentary about those films in the next few weeks or so. But we appreciate you and hope that you'll look at our other products here on our YouTube channel, and also check out some archives on our Blog Talk Radio channel as well. Thanks for watching, and you guys have a good night. Thanks for hanging out with me, Steve, Karen, and peace. And enjoy the films out there, ladies and gentlemen, and get out to the movies. We appreciate you, and take care. Good night, you guys.
Night.
Night.